A married couple living in 19th century France used the enticement of work to lure young women to their small farm in Lyons. Once the victims made their way to the residence, an abhorrent behavior reared its ugly head and eventually went down as a truly dark incident in French crime history. Montluel is a small town just approximately 12 miles from the French city of Lyon. This region had been known for a rather criminal reputation. Mostly isolated and rural, this area seemed ideal for unnecessary violence and 19th century mayhem. Because of the surrounding woods and lonely roads, the environment seemed perfect for local thieves to ambush travelers on the road and murder their victims and burying them in the woods or leaving them for the animals to devour. A unique area indeed. In fact, the region reached some level of redemption that eventually came crashing down in the latter 19th century. On February 8, 1855, some hunters making their way through a thicket surrounding Montauverne happened upon the corpse of a young female. It appeared that the young woman succumbed from a horrible death as she was covered in blood with several wounds about the head and face. The body had been stripped and appeared to be subjected to, in the vernacular of the time, a gross outrage. The sportsman who found the body also picked up a handkerchief, collar, black lace cap, and a pair of shoes which helped to identify the young woman as Marie Bidet. Marie last worked as a servant in Lyon, where she left 3 days before the discovery of her body. Marie stated to friends that before she left, that she had a job offer from a man that gave her a great employment opportunity, provided she could start right away. Another young girl from the same area, Marie Carte, received a similar offer, but because she would not be able to start until March 4th, the employing man chose Marie Bidet first. Carte described the man as a country-looking gentleman, aged 50, and having a noticeable scar or swelling on the upper lip. On March 4, 1855, the man called upon Marie Carte again, with the servant turning down his offer. But Carte had a friend, Olympe Alibert, also a house servant, took up the offer from the man and left Lyon with him. As night fell, Alibert and the man proceeded to walk through the woods near Montauverne. Alibert became alarmed at the strangeness of the atmosphere and abandoned the man near where the body of Marie Bidet had been found recently, and she sought refuge within a local farm. Alibert never saw that man again. In September, a man who matched the description given to authorities by Carte and Alibert approached another young girl, Joseph de Charty, to accompany him back to a position where she would serve as a housemaid. Charty reacted in the same way as Alibert and ran as fast as she could away from the stranger when she feared the morose walk through the woods. On October 31st, 1855, the middle-aged man again visited Montauverne and offered a servant's position to Jean Bourgeois. Again, the walk in the woods ended prematurely after the young bourgeois decided that the journey appeared too dark for her liking. So, the man went back to the village and chose one Victorine Perrine. The two then traveled back to where the man wanted her to work. This time, some sportsmen in the woods ran across the man and Perrine walking together. The middle-aged man ran off, taking with him the young woman's trunk with all her belongings. All of these incidents went almost unnoticed by the authorities of the day. The gendarmes had no idea what sinister happenings occurred, as it appeared that some of the intended victims escaped the terror that soon would be uncovered. On the 26th of May, 1861, at approximately 11 in the evening, a young woman knocked wildly at the door of a local farm in the village of Balin, hysterically crying for help against the man that intended to murder her. Her dress was torn, no shoes on her feet, her face bruised and bleeding. Immediately, the proprietor of the farm escorted the young lady to the brigade of gendarmes at Montluel, and she gave a statement to their investigators.
Today at 2 o'clock, I was crossing the bridge at La Guillotière at Lyons, when a man I had not before observed but who must have been following me plucked my dress and asked if I could tell him in what street the servant's office was situated. I mentioned 2, adding that I was myself about to visit the latter. He asked if I were in search of a place. Yes. Then he said, I have exactly the thing to suit you. I'm a gardener near Montluel, and my mistress has sent me to Lyons with positive orders to bring back a house servant, cost what it may. He enumerated the advantages I should enjoy and said that the work would be very light and the wages 250 francs, besides many Christmas boxes. A married daughter of his mistress paid her frequent visits and always left 5 francs on the mantelpiece for the maid. He added that I should expect to attend Mass regularly.
Marie Pichon continued that the man who made her the job offer was very courteous, and the offer of employment seemed extremely generous. Pichon accepted the man's employment proposal, and the two arrived after taking the train to Montluel. They arrived near nightfall at approximately 7:30 p.m. The man placed Pichon's trunk on his shoulder and requested that she follow him. The man turned to Pichon and stated that the two now had an hour-and-a-half walk through the darkness. Pichon stated that she followed the man carrying a small box in one hand and in the other a basket and an umbrella. Pichon and the man crossed the railroad tracks and walked for a long distance along a parallel road when the man suddenly turned to a steep embankment. Pichon followed closely behind with the thorny bushes catching her on her clothing and slowing her down. The man then stopped and turned toward Pichon, stating that her trunk was too heavy and that he would put it in a thicket and return with a carriage the following day to retrieve it. After walking a little further, the man took the trunk and concealed it. Pichon and the man then made their way across a couple of large fields, and he informed her that they would see the chateau soon. They arrived at the summit of a small hill and halted. Pichon stated that she noticed that throughout the entire journey, the man seemed to be very concerned over every step she took. As the two continued to walk, the man attempted to pull a stake out of the ground, but proved unsuccessful. As they went further, her sponsor attempted to pick up a large stone that he saw along the way. Pichon became concerned and inquired of the man regarding his actions. The man gave an unintelligible reply and repeated his actions a little further into the journey. Pichon also noticed that the man lagged behind a few times, and when she became more alarmed when the man reached into his tunic as if to search for a weapon or something to that effect. Pichon's questionable nature then turned to terror and made sure that the man remained in front of her the rest of the way. When they reached another small hill, Pichon noticed a small cottage with a cabbage garden. Then she decided, emphatically, a steadfast refusal to walk any further. Just then, with the man just slightly ahead of her, he turned around and let fall a cord with a running noose. A struggle ensued where Pichon eventually freed herself from the grasp of the strange man, dropped everything she carried, and ran as fast as she could. Pichon sensed and heard the stranger running behind her. She ran to a nearby house and finally found refuge near the train station. The authorities became very interested in Pichon's rendition of the events as they occurred. Immediately, the local constabulary searched the area and soon concentrated on a small cottage located in the village of Dumollard. The village soon became abuzz with gossip regarding the village's master and the antisocial behavior of his wife. Their name was the same as the village, Dumollard. The master, known as Martin Dumollard, soon endured the questioning from the authorities as to whether they had the man that attacked Marie Pichon. Dumollard was a rather large man who had a scar or a tumor on his upper lip. Dumollard became belligerent and evasive when it came to his motives and whereabouts regarding Pichon. Authorities felt their best course of action was to arrest the large man and bring him to the station located at Trevoux. Once Dumollard stood in front of Pichon, the young girl hysterically identified the man as her assailant. After authorities took Dumollard into custody and escorted him back to the station, other officers searched the Dumollard residence. Investigators discovered clothes, linen, pieces of lace, ribbons, gowns, handkerchiefs, shoes, and other assorted articles of clothing from what appeared to be many young women. Authorities also noted that these articles belonged to women of the servant class. Many of the articles contained smears and stains of blood. Other clothing appeared to have been laundered. Police suspected that the married man must be harboring a mistress somewhere, or there was a darker, more sinister reason for Dumollard holding on to the clothing, especially when the articles contained sizable quantities of blood. The night after the search, Dumollard's wife was taken into custody, and she exhibited a propensity to confess. Dumollard's wife remembered an incident when her husband returned home after being out working. He carried a silver watch and some bloody clothing, which he instructed her to wash immediately. She claimed that Dumollard confessed to murdering a young girl, and he had to return to the mountain wood in order to bury her. He then picked up a pickaxe and left the house. The girl he allegedly murdered left her luggage at the train station, and Dumollard was supposed to retrieve it. He never did. Investigators sought to discover where a Mrs. Dumollard's story of the murdered girl proved true. They organized a search party of the mountain wood and brought the two suspects along with them. For hours, the party searched where directed by the two accused murderers. Then, the investigators and their laborers located a spot approximately 50 yards into the wood. They dug for an hour at Dumollard's direction. At first, it appeared that the suspect played games with the investigators, but then a detective noticed a slight disturbance in the soil. Two shrubs occupied that area, and it appeared that they had not taken root. Additionally, flies seemed to congregate around the small mound. The bushes were removed, and the investigators directed the laborers to dig around those bushes. As the dig continued, one of the laborers found the back of a human hand. As the soil cleared, the corpse of a young girl was uncovered. Because of the condition of the soil, her body remained preserved. The corpse lay on its back, with the left hand on her bosom. The fingers appeared to be clutching a clump of soil. Investigators surmised that the young lady had been buried while still alive. The whole time the investigators directed the digging, Dumollard exhibited no emotion whatsoever at the discovery. His lack of remorse took the investigators by surprise. However, he refused to look into the face of the victim. Authorities stated that his deeds would not go unnoticed, and it would behoove Dumollard to make a full confession to his crimes. Dumollard agreed, and once they arrived back at the station, he sat down and related his crimes for the authorities. Dumollard related that in December of 1853, he met two men in Lyons, farmers, according to Dumollard. After buying him a glass of wine at a local tavern, the three of them went for a walk. The two men made a proposal to Dumollard for kidnapping young women. The suspect immediately took the men up on their offer. The men offered him 40 francs for every girl and promised if he stayed with them for 20 years, they can guarantee Dumollard over 100,000 francs. Dumollard received his instructions from the men that he was to find young girls and lure them beyond the city with an advantageous employment offer. Dumollard's first attempt failed near the Place de la Charité, but then he met another young woman, offered her the pretend situation, and after her acceptance, Dumollard and the young woman walked out of the town. When Dumollard and the young girl arrived at the edge of the woods near the town, the two men then met him there. Dumollard then told the young woman that he forgot something back in the town and that she would be accompanied by the two men to her final destination. Dumollard waited for approximately 3 hours before the men returned. They handed him something and instructed him to give it to his wife as a gift. One of the men held a bundle of bloody clothing, which he then handed to Dumollard. Dumollard then stated to detectives that he demanded to know what happened to the woman. Then one of the men stated, "You will not see her again." On the way to his home, Dumollard stated that he washed the clothing in a fountain at Néron, where he had then given them to his wife, and stated that he purchased them at Lyons. As he rendered a confession, Dumollard noted that he believed the men murdered the young girl on the Bridge du Ber and then threw her body into the Rhône. He strongly believed this because when the three men walked over the bridge one day, one of them stated that the two had deposited bodies from that bridge. Dumollard then stated that nothing occurred until February of 1855, when the same two men met him at a tavern, and they had with them a young girl who had a dark complexion. The three men then made the imaginary offer to the young girl, and then the three set out on the road between Irabel to Iomanish, which passed through a wooded area. At a crossroads, Dumollard decided to sit down and inform the two men that he was going no further. The other two men attempted to get Dumollard to go with them, but he again refused to resume the trek. When the men returned to the spot where they left Dumollard, they stated that they left her at a local farm. Dumollard was unaware as to whether they harmed the young girl or not. Dumollard went on with his stories about the mysterious two men. He continued with his statement, insisting that the young girls continued to go missing and eventually the two men murdered them. Events such as the ones Dumollard described went on into December of 1858 and into 1861. Subsequently, Dumollard could not produce the proof of the other two men, and therefore the authorities eventually charged him with 7 counts of murder, taking into account that Dumollard actually murdered some women and attacked the others, including Marie Badet, Marie Bousseau, an unidentified skeleton found in Mountain Wood, and another body found in Communes Wood. The investigators also saw to it that Dumollard also stood charged for robbery and attempted assassination on the others that survived. The additional evidence discovered at the Dumollard residence pointed to far more victims than the defendant now stood accused. One of the things that was not well publicized were the articles of clothing that authorities found in the Dumollard residence that belonged to children. Investigators believe that Dumollard and his wife may have been responsible for crimes against children, and were stained with deeds as horrible as those confessed to, perhaps never to be revealed on earth. After gathering the evidence and charging Dumollard and his wife, the trial commenced on January 29, 1862, at the Assizes of Aisne. The trial lasted 4 days, and the court heard testimony from the women who escaped Dumollard's grasp. The courtroom was crowded, even to the point of those who waited outside to get a look at Les Vampires de Lyons. The women who survived positively identified Dumollard as the man who led them through the woods, and some he attacked. At that time, law enforcement attempted to identify some criminal traits through the science of phrenology. This is where an examination of the bumps upon one's skull to determine, based upon some very liberal protocols, whether someone may be prone to criminal behavior. The phrenologists actually determined that Dumollard's skull did depict traits of someone who fit into the more Cro-Magnon category, and did exhibit traits of a primordial proclivity to hurt people without any remorse. In other words, Dumollard could have been considered a psychopath and a sociopath. Once the jury was impaneled, Dumollard complained to the court that he felt a draft coming from somewhere in the courtroom which affected his breathing. The court accommodated the defendant and plugged the draft. After humoring him, the prosecution called Dumollard to the stand to be questioned. After giving a sad yet unbelievable rendition of his young life, the defendant took his seat in the well. Several witnesses came forward to testify against the defendant and his wife. It seemed to the court that Dumollard held a confidence that he may not be convicted. After the arguments of counsel, the jury found Dumollard guilty, along with his wife, with extenuating circumstances. The giant of a man exhibited a livid glance within his stare as he eyed the courtroom. This was the first time since his arrest that Dumollard showed any emotion whatsoever. uncharacteristic of the coolness that he showed before. The president of the court announced the sentence as death, with the execution to take place at Montluel. Marianne Dumollard was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment and hard labor. On February 27, 1862, Dumollard's appeal went all the way to the emperor, who stated, "Il n'y a lieu," there is no room, meaning the appeal nor a pardon would be granted. The magistrates were ordered to execute the sentence within 24 hours of the denial of the appeal. However, it would take a while to move the guillotine to the place designated by the court for the execution. It had to be moved from the Palais de Justice and had to be transported very quickly to Montluel. The authorities implored Dumollard that he should seek forgiveness and reconciliation from his wife, offering the condemned man a reprieve to remove his irons to accomplish this act. Mr. and Mrs. Dumollard sat and had their last meal as husband and wife. He reassured his wife to not worry about him. After a short conversation, the two departed. On March 8, 1862, the gendarme placed Dumollard on a wagon to make the short journey to Montluel. Before the wagon arrived, the crowds gathered outside of the city. The scaffold had been constructed during the previous night. It seemed that the protocols for execution went rather quickly as Dumollard was seated, his legs tied together, then his arms, and his long hair cut to make room for the falling blade. The condemned man tried to walk the steps, and there was a priest there to hear whether he asked for forgiveness. Just as he made his way up the stairs, Dumollard whispered to the priest, "Jesus, Mary, pray for me." When he reached the top of the scaffold, Dumollard kneeled at the step and then fell to his knees. The gendarme then picked up the giant by the arms and walked him the rest of the way to the guillotine. The executioners placed Dumollard in the cradle of the blade and then stood back. The blade came down quickly, and soon those who were present stated that they viewed Dumollard's head and corpse within the same coffin. Most French people, when they heard of the execution of Martin Dumollard, they believed the Vampire of Lyons paid the appropriate price for the crimes he committed. After his death, people all over the country began the legends of the French wolf, whose name was Martin Dumollard. Martin Dumollard had been referenced throughout history as a vampire of sorts. The historical record does not reflect whether authorities discovered that Dumollard ever drank blood, but criminologists state emphatically that Dumollard stands in crime history as France's first serial killer. However, on this channel we did profile Gilles de Rais, which we suggest that you perhaps watch that interesting presentation and then make up your own mind. Now, if you like what we do here, please hit the like, subscribe, and the bell to be notified of future episodes. Also, if you could see your way to help support our channel, we are on Subscribestar, PayPal, and Rumble.com. I will leave the links below. Until next time.